Hello and welcome to today's main event, presenting the state of the language services industry and findings from the annual Nimdzi 100 Market Report. My name is Sarah Hickey and I'll be hosting this event today. 2022 was a particularly interesting year to analyze because the language industry was coming out of two exceptional years. In 2020, growth slowed down as the market adjusted to lockdowns and a changing environment. And 2021 then was a boom year that saw growth in the industry skyrocket due to backlog demand from 2020 paired with new demand as language service providers, or LSPs as we call them, were reaping the rewards of the efforts put in at the start of the pandemic. Today, we take a look back at 2022 and discuss what is in store for 2023. I'm sorry, I have a brief BBC moment going on here as my little 2-year-old wanted to see what Mama's up to. And my mom comes to the rescue. Thank you. Okay, moving on. Cool. We are hosting this as a live event on LinkedIn. So if you are joining us live, then we encourage you to engage directly with us in the comments, and we will respond to any questions or insights from the audience during the live stream. If you missed the live stream and are watching the recording, then you can still reach out to us at info@nimdzi.com. This is an ongoing series. So if this is your first Nimdzi event and you are not already following Nimdzi Insights, you can do so to make sure that you are notified in your feed when we schedule new events. When you follow Nimdzi Insights, you'll be notified when they go live or when the recordings are available. Today's event is part of the Globalization Research Series track, where we highlight the latest industry research and host a conversation about the findings with experts from the industry. Make sure to check out the recordings available from our previous events. For example, Measuring Program Maturity with Julia Taditi of Qualtrics and Localization Business Confidence Survey Results with Rick Antazana from Dynamic Languages and Virpal Singh of Digital Talk. As well as sign up for the upcoming events that we have on the calendar. Choosing the right investment in the language services industry with Jordan Kay of Mobius Investments, Language Inclusivity and Accessibility with Veronica DiMartino of Eventbrite, and presenting the Lessons in Localization Omnibus with Julia Greco of Shopify, Tamara Tierjak of Frontier Development, Vinicius Brito of Envent, and Paul Gerton of Royal Philips. Today's featured research is, of course, the Nimdzi 100 Market Report. We will be going over the takeaways from the research today as an exclusive preview. And the full report will then be published on nimdzi.com this Friday, March 10th. Also, for those of you who are Multilingual magazine subscribers, you will receive a copy of the full report directly to your mailbox along with the next issue of Multilingual magazine. Many industry investors and outside private equity firms use G in the localization industry. And so if that is you, we encourage you to check out today's featured case study, Expert Due Diligence for Private Equity Investment, available at nimdzi.com/testimonials, as well as tune in next week when we talk to Jordan Kay of Mobius Equity to discuss how to choose the right investment in the language services industry. For our discussion today, I'm joined by my colleague, Nimdzi's founder and longtime industry analyst, Renato Beninatto.
Hello, everybody. I'm happy to be here.
Always great to have you, Renato. So let's not waste any time. We're going to jump right in. We're going to start with the ranking. This slide here introduces you to the 15 largest companies in the language services industry based on their 2022 revenues. For the 5th year in a row, TransPerfect takes the lead, followed by RWS and Language Line Solutions. Only 2 years ago, the top 3 on our list were the only ones that exceeded $500 million in revenue. And by now, as many as the top 7 on our ranking have revenues that exceed this barrier. 9 out of the top 10 companies in the industry are headquartered in English-speaking countries this year. Only one company, namely Accolade Group, is based in France. And looking at the size of the companies in terms of revenue, it jumps out right away that the top 5 on our list are a lot bigger than the rest. In fact, the top 5 companies make up more than 56% of the combined revenues of the top 15 and 35% of the combined revenues of the top 100, just to put that into perspective. And this gap here between the top 5 to the top 15 in the ranking and the rest of the top 100 is only going to increase in 2023, given the consolidation of top players we've been seeing in the last years. Now, let's take a closer look at this year's top 100 and how much their combined revenues grew compared to the combined revenues of the top 100 from the previous 2 periods. As you can see from the graph, between 2021 and 2022, the combined revenues of the top 100 positions in our ranking increased by 17.1% compared to 22.7% growth for the top 100 in the previous period and 6.8% in the year before that. What we see here is a clear reflection of the market dynamics that we've observed, because in 2020, the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic caused the growth in our industry to slow down, not stop, but slow down, which is reflected in the growth of the top 100 from that period. The next year, then 2021, was a record year that saw revenues and overall growth in the industry skyrocket. This was largely due to a backlog in demand from 2020, also paired with LSPs having adjusted their services and workflows to the new normal. This is why we are seeing such a spike there. And coming to the latest year, the latest completed year, 2022, what we can see is that growth has been more moderate. There was a lot more growth across all ranking segments compared to 2020, but less than during the boom year 2021. So in some ways, we can say that growth has returned to normal or has stabilized after 2 exceptional years. It's also worth noting that currency fluctuations played a larger role than usual in 2022, as a number of world currencies, including the British pound and the Japanese yen, experienced an all-time low against a very strong US dollar. And much like other industries, we use the US dollar as a common denominator for our ranking, so currency fluctuations impacted the overall growth that we're reporting this year. While the last graph showed the growth percentage of the combined revenues of the top 100 ranking positions over a 3-year period, this graph here shows the combined revenue of the top 100 in total figures over a 6-year period, so from 2017 to 2022. In total figures, the top 100 had a combined revenue of $7.4 billion in 2017, and in 2022, that combined revenue grew to $12.7 billion. That is an increase of 52.8% over the 6-year period. Of course, this is just one indicator we use for a market sizing estimate, but it's nonetheless an important one that shows us that the industry continues to grow. Well, speaking of market sizing, Renato, over to you to tell us more about that.
Sure, thank you, Sarah. So we estimate that the language services industry reached 64.7 billion in 2022, and it should grow to close to 70 billion in 2023. If we look at the 5-year projection, in 2020, we had reduced our growth estimate to reflect the impact of the pandemic. And we adjusted the calculation of the compound annual growth rate, or CAGR, to 6%, down from 6.2 and 6.8 in the previous years. However, after this phenomenal 2021 with record growth, our estimate for 2021 reflected a one-off increase of 10% compared to 2020. This was an adjustment that we had to do, and already in last year's Nimdzi 100, we predicted that it was unrealistic to expect that this exceptional level of growth would continue. So we continue to expect that the industry is going to grow, but not at the same pace as we had expected in March 2020. So because of the changes in the market, that LSPs have adapted very well at that point in time. This is why in March of 2022, we projected a CAGR of 7% for the coming years. Considering the results from this year's ranking, we can now confirm this growth projection, despite some economic uncertainty, particularly thanks to the second half of 2022. This is why We continue to predict that the market will grow at a CAGR of 7% in the coming years, reaching $90 billion by 2027. So our 5-year projection puts us at $90 billion in 5 years. So although this consolidation process continues, the language services industry continues to be fragmented. The top 100 companies in our ranking accounted for just 19.6% of the overall language industry in 2022. This is 1.7% more than 2021. Adding the companies that we have in the watch list and those in the close but no cigar, which is our honorary ranking, all 169 large LSPs tracked by Nimdzi accounted for 22.7% of the language industry in 2022. The industry is still predominantly made up of companies much smaller than $10 million in revenue. So if we move on and look at the mergers and acquisitions and investments that happened in 2022, we compared to 2021, which was a boom year for the industry with an increase in activity of over 60% compared to 2020. There were 62 completed transactions in 2021, but 2022 wasn't as active, and the activity was more restrained, probably, or according to our research, due to macroeconomic factors, geopolitical challenges, and uncertainty. When there is uncertainty, people put the brakes on, and the volume of deals was slightly reduced. The outlook for M&A in 2023 depends a lot on the performance of interest rates and business confidence. Though there's still some risk in the market, investors with confidence and experience can seize opportunities by adapting their strategies to the current conditions. Looking at the results of this year's Nimdzi 100 survey, the numbers confirm the narrative. In this year's survey for the Nimdzi 100, more than half, 52.4% of the respondents stated that they're looking for companies to acquire, which is 4.8% more compared, 4.8 percentage points, not 4.8%, 4.8 percentage points compared to last year's results. Also, 34.3% are looking to sell, which is an increase of 8.8 percentage points compared to 2021, confirming, once again, that there are fewer companies that want to sell, and this is naturally a seller's market still. In the same vein, the number of companies stating that they're not thinking about M&A at all has decreased by 2.6 percentage points. In other words, M&A interest in the language services industry remains very high. Let's talk a little bit about women. This is March, and tomorrow is International Universal Women's Day. This year, 19 companies in our ranking are women-run and women-owned. The number increased from 17 in 2022, and overall, this places our industry well above the global average of 10%, which is a statistic that was presented by Fortune 500 in January of this year. The majority of these women-run or owned companies are based in North America, followed closely by Europe. So there are 9 in North America and 8 in Europe, respectively. And 2 companies are based in Asia. As much as we want to laud the progress in our industry and congratulate these women for their achievements, it's also important to highlight the distance we still have to go. Although 19% of the companies are women-led, only 77.2% of the total revenue of the Nimdzi Top 100 is generated by these LSPs. Furthermore, there are again no female CEOs among the top 10 largest companies in the industry. The distribution is far from equal, and we hope to see this gap narrow. And speaking of women, back to you, Sarah.
Thanks, Renato. Okay, now that we talked about growth and took a look at the numbers, let's talk about the key trends we identified throughout the course of this year's research. For a couple of years now, we've been monitoring a trend we've been calling the new LSP. And although it's not a new trend, it's certainly a continuous one that we see expressed in many different ways. At the core of this trend lies the desire of LSPs to not just be an external vendor, but rather an extension of their clients' operations. In their effort to achieve this, LSPs become hyper customer centric, adding adjacent services, so not language services, but they fall into a bracket that is accommodating, and embedding themselves deeply into the client's internal structure to a point that makes them almost irreplaceable, or at least much harder to cut ties with. Examples we have seen are in-housing teams on the client's premises, creating a new app for a specific client, and of course, providing an end-to-end solution in the form of managed services. In addition, LSPs are also redefining their self-image and they're trying to come up with a name that better reflects their new reality and ultimately generate better leads. Popular solutions that are currently making the rounds include Localization Success Partner and Localization Solutions Partner, so keeping the old acronym with LSP, but also LangOps, short for Language Operations, is being discussed a lot these days. And in addition, some LSPs also continue to redefine themselves as tech companies instead. So we were wondering, why do they do that? Well, for two main reasons. On the one hand, of course, for differentiation and marketing purposes, with the ultimate goal of attracting more customers by changing the conversation. And then, of course, to also make the company more attractive for outside investment. The, the industry has been flooded with private equity and venture capital investment in recent years. And by rebranding from LSP to tech company, a business can potentially increase their valuation by up to 5 times. In reality, the two factors can be described as two sides of the same coin that go kind of hand in hand. Because as companies are participating in the AI, MT, automation hype and rebrand to fit the bill, their hope is to attract more clients. And of course, in doing so, this makes the company more attractive to investment firms. One final note on this topic. When we started reporting about this trend a few years ago, it was mostly true for the biggest players in the industry. But what we are starting to see now is that this trend is slowly trickling down into the mid-market segment as well. So that will be interesting to monitor in the coming years. Last year, our research for the Nimdzi 100 found that talent acquisition and talent retention were the top 2 biggest challenges for LSPs of all sizes. Factors named at the time including difficulty in finding and affording the right people at the right time, and competition from tech giants offering more lucrative positions. This year, then, the data show that only 1/3 of companies who took our survey are still experiencing challenges related to talent acquisition and retention. And in addition, when asked directly during the interview stage of this project, LSPs confirmed that aside from the peaks and valleys in demand surrounding hyper-growth spurts, attracting and retaining talent is no longer a top-of-mind concern. An interesting development in this regard is related to the mass layoffs in the tech industry that I'm sure you've all heard of. Between October 2022 and January 2023, news of layoffs and the thousands to tens of thousands at tech giants have made headlines. And in interviews, LSPs who derive a large portion of their revenue from clients in the sector revealed that as a result of these layoffs, employees who had previously left the company to work for the client side are now looking to return to their previous positions at the LSP. This is actually not uncommon because typically when layoffs occur on the client side, there's an increase in demand for contractors. In other words, the need for language services doesn't disappear, and the people who did the work on the client side are then doing the work on the vendor side. And therefore, actually, the demand for LSPs increases. Now, ever since the boom in virtual events caused by the pandemic, we have witnessed both the emergence of the multilingual meeting provider that we call MMP and the multi-skilled linguist as a direct result of the fact that clients are increasingly looking for one provider that can facilitate all of their needs in the multilingual meetings and events space in the virtual and physical world. Today, multilingual meetings are more than just interpreting and increasingly include services such as captioning, subtitling, re-speaking, or it's also called speech-to-text interpreting, document translation, and voiceovers. As a result, we're also seeing completely new players coming onto the scene, including, for example, machine translation providers, but also pure tech players from outside the language industry to media localization companies, video conferencing giants, so Zoom and the likes, and LSPs. At the same time, then, the traditional players in this field, the RSI providers, the ones who provide remote simultaneous interpreting, are expanding the offering to reach a wider client base, for example, by adding their own machine interpreting solutions. It should come as no surprise that this trend has also trickled down to the linguists who are facilitating these meetings. The pandemic pushed many into offering a more diversified service portfolio, as they sought to make ends meet. And today, many interpreters are increasingly moving into new terrains such as voiceovers, re-speaking, captioning, technology consulting, and also event management in an effort to stay relevant and offer a better service to their clients. We're making two predictions in this regard. First, as the multilingual meeting provider develops, we can expect that the multi-skilled linguist will be in high demand. And number two, as the pandemic effect winds down, the novelty of interpreting systems and environments is waning. Instead, what we are seeing is that the focus is increasingly shifting toward event management. And we predict that over time, the different language services MMPs offer will simply become features on event platforms that clients can avail of. Now, onto AI, a big topic. AI has made incredible strides in recent years, and of course, we're also going to talk about ChatGPT in this presentation. But for now, we want to briefly highlight a few developments in the area of artificial intelligence that are specific to the language industry, starting with machine-generated live subtitling. Ever since the Zoom boom, the use of purely machine-generated live subtitles has increased both as a result of higher demand and advances in MT technology. Similarly to the wider multilingual meeting space, the providers of live subtitling services are coming from different sides of the industries, including the areas of media localization, machine translation, RSI, and tech companies from outside the industry, as well as video conferencing giants such as Zoom, MS Teams, and WebEx, who have all added their own text-to-speech translation features on their platforms. In other words, with the advances of AI, we're starting to see crossovers between segments of the industry that used to be quite separate for a long time. Then AI dubbing. Dubbing is one of the bread and butter services in the media localization industry, and to date, one that is almost exclusively performed by voice actors. However, the latest developments in AI dubbing might change that landscape. Today, some synthetic voices sound so incredibly similar to human voices that they are difficult to distinguish from actual human speech. And latest technological innovations even allow for the synthetic voice to mimic the inflection and mannerisms of the original speaker. Although it's not fit for entertainment purposes yet, maybe, AI dubbing is already being used in international broadcasts, voiceovers for documentaries, and corporate videos. And several media and game localization providers shared with us this year that they are exploring use cases, for example, for minor characters, background chatter, different tiers. So depending on the dubbing quality that's needed, different kinds of productions and budgets. The option to change voices via AI, for example, that child actors could be dubbed by older ones to increase efficiency. Voices of specific actors could be sold to someone, so someone else could do the dubbing and the voice is altered later. And also for audio description, because that is a service that is not available in many markets yet. And even then, it's mostly in English. So AI dubbing could solve this in a budget-friendly way, because it's not a service where a lot of emotion and acting is needed compared to the actual dubbing in movies and TV shows. So Although the exploration of this technology is ongoing, it is significant that the idea of AI dubbing has transitioned from being rejected to being actively researched and considered by major media localization players. And last but not least, machine interpreting. So, what is machine interpreting, first of all? It's the transmission of a spoken message in one language into a spoken message in a different language using AI. The solutions currently on the market can be roughly divided into two categories, those for individuals and those for businesses. I'm just going to focus on the ones for businesses now. In the business world, machine interpreting is moving into the sphere of multilingual online meetings and conferences. The pandemic ushered in a new era of virtual meetings, driving the need for multilingualism online. And at the same time, technology in this space made significant leaps, particularly thanks to the advances made in machine generated live subtitling. This combination has resulted in more companies investing in speech to speech technology, and new solutions are popping up on the market all the time. And in the language industry, what we're seeing is that the first RSI providers are coming into the space now. Just in January 2023, Kudo, for example, was the first RSI platform to release its own MI feature. Of course, this allows the company to, on the one hand, tap into a larger client pool, but also stay competitive when up against companies like Zoom, WebEx, MS Teams, who are all in the process of adding similar features. So, last but not least on my list in the trends here, we have OpenAI's ChatGPT. It's all the rage these days, and for good reason. The technology has come a long way, and some are calling it a tipping point for AI. So, in case you've been living under a rock, here's a brief introduction. GPT-3 is trained on public data and applies machine learning to perform a number of on-demand tasks with only minimal input. ChatGPT is the latest variant of GPT-3 and can, for example, write and correct code, generate conversational text, explain complex subject matters, and it can be fine-tuned or customized for a variety of language tasks. And it can do much more, but that's just a brief summary. In the language industry, people are, of course, also talking about ChatGPT and are trying to figure out how it will impact them. Well, while it's too early to make firm statements, it's not unlikely that large language models, such as GPT-3, will be embedded in different steps of the translation process. Already, it has proven to be a useful tool to unlock writer's block in the content creation process or to fast-track scripts for presentations and speeches. While not entirely monolingual, the technology works best in English for now. Additional use cases that have been determined so far include augmented MT, for example, around eliminating gender bias and adapting formality, TMS integrations, and of course, transcreation as well, producing more content at a faster pace. Right now, there's a lot of hype, and ChatGPT has already become a game changer, no matter which way you look at it. However, whether this means that the technology will be a true disruptor in the long run, in the sense that it will impact our everyday lives as well as our workflows in the language industry, is rather doubtful, but also remains too early to say. So this is where we would like to introduce the Beninatto theorem, if I pronounce that correctly. Renato, please take it away.
Well, I find it funny that the team decided to call it the Beninatto theorem, but it is a universal principle that I unveiled in our internal discussions, that people tend to adopt new fears, like they're afraid of how the future is going to make them obsolete or irrelevant, and before they are able to overcome the previous fears, which is eventually going to disappear and fade into their subconscious. So in the language industry, this phenomenon is manifesting as the introduction of new technologies, creating new fears, and that this is going to be the demise of the industry. So, however, the time passes and new technologies emerge, the industry becomes to overcome those fears, and they eventually become relegated to subconscious level. This cycle repeats as each new technology brings new fears. So the interesting thing about this is that I've been observing this since I moved from the typewriter to the computer. Every time that a new technology comes in, the internet, whatever, right now, Chat GPT just replaced Neural MT as the next thing that is going to kill the translation and localization industry. The Beninatto theorem and the Amara's law give us a framework to understand the impact of new technologies in the language industry. The Amara's law, if you don't remember, is the one that says that we tend to overestimate the short-term effects of a technology and underestimate its long-term impact. So if we consider both of these principles, we can gain a more objective and comprehensive understanding of how ChatGPT and other AI language models will shape or not the future of the industry. So we now, having this in mind, let's take a look at how global events impact our business. We like to say here in Nimdzi that language services, the industry as a whole, is impervious to crisis. There is always a need for language services, and this is why our industry continues to outpace the growth of the global economy. At the same time, there's no denying the fact that individual businesses will have ups and downs, and the recent shocks in the global economy have triggered some reshuffling of the labor market, and we're currently experiencing inflation, currency fluctuations, an energy crisis, and layoffs in the tech industry. For this year, in the Nimdzi 100, we wanted to know, and we asked in our survey, how many LSPs are already feeling the impact of these global events, and how many, and for how many it is impacting their 2023 strategy. So let's take a look at the results. The results from the survey show that 2 out of 5 companies are already feeling the impact of the economic crisis, and another 30% are preparing for it in their 2023 strategy, despite not feeling the impact yet. 30% also report not feeling any impact at all. So what we find by digging deeper is that we asked those who reported having felt the impact of the economy, what strategies they have implemented so far. So for companies in this bracket, the most popular strategy has been to invest in technology and process change. 68.2% of the people have done that. Another 43.2%, of course, multiple answers were allowed in this question, because the 68% plus 42 is more than 100, right? So 43% have also added new services, and approximately a third have raised their prices or reduced staff. Just 15.9% have reduced prices as a reaction to the economic changes. When we look at the customers and through the course of our analysis, we see that it's not just LSPs who are impacted. Everyone is impacted by the changes, and buyers are no exception. So we asked respondents to our survey what the reactions from their clients have been so far. And the majority of the companies note that clients have reduced their order volumes, and that's what 64.2% of the respondents said. And another 22.2% report that clients have reduced the number of languages they're localizing into. In addition, 44.4% state that clients are choosing cheaper machine-generated solutions instead of human-led services. For 16% of the respondents, clients have not made any changes to their business, to the way they do business with them yet. So it's just a minority there. Lastly, we wanted to know what strategies companies in our industry are implementing to combat inflation and economic pressures in 2023. The results show that the most reported course of action for LSPs is increasing the use of machine translation. Almost 60% of the companies will be using this as a cost-saving method. Other popular solutions include increasing prices with clients, almost 40% of the companies, and reducing office space, 32.9%. In addition to these strategies to increase revenues and cut costs, more than half of the companies report that they will increase salaries for their employees to help compensate for the higher cost of living. Only 17.8% are planning to reduce staff, and 23.3% want to ask vendors to reduce their rates. Okay, so what do we make of all of this, Sarah? Tell us.
Gladly. Thank you. Yes, where does all of this leave us, and what can we leave you with today? So now that we've been through the data and discussed the main trends, you may agree that 2022 was indeed a particularly interesting year to analyze, as the language industry was coming out of two exceptional years. So as we already said, the pandemic slowed things down in 2020 as the market adjusted to lockdowns and a changing environment, which was followed by a boom year in 2021 with record growth thanks to a backlog in demand and LSPs reaping the rewards of the efforts put in at the start of the pandemic. 2022 then was somewhat of a mixed bag, as growth was certainly stronger than in 2020, but more moderate compared to the exceptional growth of 21. So putting the year into context, we can say that in many ways, life has returned to normal. We have adapted to life after and with the pandemic. Everyone is traveling again. Conferences are being held on site once more. All the while, remote services are here to stay. On the other side of the coin, the global economy is experiencing inflation and an energy crisis. There's a war in Europe and mass layoffs in the tech industry, all leading to an overall feeling of uncertainty. Subsequently, for most businesses in our industry, the first half of 2022 was slow, but the very same businesses also reported a strong second half of the year. Looking ahead, we are optimistic. Yes, the current economic pressure and uncertainty are not overcome yet, but once again, our industry has already adapted to the situation again. The language industry is a growth industry, and language services are essential services. And as we like to say, there's always a need for language services. I'd like to thank everybody for joining us today. Whether you are joining live or watching the recording afterwards, please also join me in thanking Renato. Oh my God, Tucker, who's working in the background, by the way. I think I jumped the gun with the outro script. I went straight to the outro. There he is, the man behind the scenes. You know him, you love him. You've seen him many times. I thought I'd do the outro first and then ask questions, but that makes no sense. Let's take questions first.
Yeah, I'll jump
Before I
in.
thank all of you.
I'll jump in here. Thank you to everybody. We've had over 400 people signing up today, and it looks like currently 140 approximately people joining us live. So welcome to everybody. Countries around the world represented today. I've been doing my best to get some questions from the audience today, so let's just get right into it. First one from Stavrula Sokoli, and I'm sorry with the pronunciation, Stavrula Sokoli. Why do we call the language services industry fragmented and not decentralized? And if I know Renato, he's going to take this one.
It's actually not. Decentralized would mean that you have a central organization that is spread in one organization that is spread in different locations of different countries and different situations. Our industry, the concept of a fragmented industry is as an industry where you don't have a player that is dominant. It's the opposite of a monopoly or an oligarchy, where you have a very small number of players, or a cartel, a very small number of players that control and drive all the variables in the industry. Because of the nature of our business that touches all the areas of expertise and has different ways of delivery, we have individuals who are buying translation services in local markets. You have small companies, you have very large enterprise buying services in a centralized way, in a decentralized way, in a scattered way. So the reality is that in certain situations, suppliers are also competitors. So you have a freelance translator working in Kenya for one of the top 100 companies in the world. He is a competitor when he sells directly to his client in Kenya, but he is also a supplier in the supply chain of the largest player. The concept of fragmentation is a concept that has economic definitions, and the FTC in the United States tracks industries to verify if there is a monopoly in the industry, because monopolies are bad, and they have a formula for you to calculate whether the market is concentrated, which is the opposite of fragmented. And I did that calculation a few times using the formula of the STC, and our industry is more than fragmented. It is pulverized. It has very, very, very small players all over the world. And Nimdzi published last week, and you can see it on our website or on LinkedIn and social media, a pyramid that Sarah prepared with our estimates of the numbers of players in each segment. It's a very interesting pyramid image. You can find it, and you're going to understand how this fragmentation happens. And thank you for the question.
Great. And yes, thank you for the question. Next up, we have from Christina Volke. Will LSPs be able to keep these talents when the big companies start hiring again? So this is referring back to the discussion on how when there's mass layoffs on the client side, a lot of that talent migrates over to the vendor side. So what are you guys' thoughts on whether or not these talents are going to be able to stick around on the LSP side, or will they just jump ship again and go back to the client side once the economic kerfuffle is completed?
Well, I would say you can never have a guarantee. In the end, for anybody, it often comes down to who has the best offer in terms of, working conditions as well as pay. So I think you don't have a guarantee. At the same time, I do know that the LSPs working in that space and in other segments of the industry as well are putting in a lot of effort as well to keep good talent around. And so I don't see people jumping around too much, but I think you can never have a guarantee.
Anything to add, Renato?
Look, the market is dynamic, and we need to think of labor as something that is fluid, right? As people progress in their careers and gain experience, they search new experiences. So there is a constant flux of new people coming into the industry. This industry is now close to 40 years in existence. So you already have a few generations of people who are retiring from the industry. And you have this constant ebb and flow of people moving around, which is an indication of the good health of an industry that's still vibrant, it's still attracting talent, and there are people that are finding careers in this space within organizations. Keep in mind that translation and localization in most enterprise is a middle management job. It's not an executive role. It's not a top level job. So it's natural for people to get promoted and to move around as they mature professionally.
Great. Thank you, Renato. And thank you for the question. Next up, we have Carmen Hears. What is managed services as it relates to the language industry? How much time you got? This is a convoluted question.
Do you want to answer it, Tucker? You're good at that.
Yeah. This is probably one for me. I was hoping to be the question guy today. I'm going to answer with a non-answer, and I've worked on a lot of managed services projects throughout my career, and we work with a lot of clients that have this set up. And My answer to the question of what is managed services is that's a question that you need to ask every single client, every single vendor that you're talking to about the subject, because everybody kind of has this different perception of what exactly is a managed services. And you kind of got the spectrum from staffing all the way through fully outsourced work, which is what managed services really should represent. But I believe that in our industry quite a bit, we get staffing and managed services conflated a little bit. So when I'm talking about managed services, we're talking about fully outsourced services. An argument could be made even that project management for a language services provider is a form of managed service, but we don't actually call that a managed service a lot of time because we somewhat take it for granted. But yeah, that's my attempt to answer. But
let me add something.
It's a dangerous question to ask because there's no one size fits all, depending on who you're asking.
But let me add an element of context in this moment to your answer, Tucker. When you have a moment of the example of the layoffs, and what Sarah mentioned, that our research has indicated that people are going from the end client to the LSP side. What happens is that when there are layoffs, there's not enough people to do the job inside the company that did the layoff. But the need for translation doesn't go away. So what happens is that there is an increased demand for the type of services that managed services are. So that job that was done in-house by a project manager, a content developer, a localization engineer, goes out to the LSP, and it's outsourced instead of being in-house. So essentially, this movement of people going from the buyer side to the LSP side is essentially just people are doing the same job on the other side of the fence. So that's the role of managed services and why there is an increased demand for managed services in times of crisis.
Thank you for the additional commentary there. You're saving my butt, Renato. Next one, Kostya Konstantin Dranch asks for Sarah Hickey. Lilt, Smartling, and Unbabble are some of the most funded translation startups in the world. Investors put a lot of funds into disrupting the industry. Is there any transparency into whether this disruption is happening or failing? So are the attempts at disruption happening or are they failing?
Well,
and he said it's for Sarah, but I'll open this up to anybody.
Yeah. Thanks, Kostya, for throwing that one my way. Because
thanks,
particularly,
Kostya.
Yeah, thanks, Kostya. I'll see you soon, no, seriously. To be perfectly honest, when it comes to that particular niche of the market, that is not my main forte. So I'll pass to Renato in a second. But the one thing I would add is that if you have to ask if something is a true disruptor, then it's not. I think you know when it's a true disruptor. That is the one thing I would say. But Renato, what do you think?
Very, very good point. And I think that the question is a little loaded because these companies have positioned and attracted a lot of investment as technology companies. But eventually they find out that the revenue is really in services. So they reach a certain point in their growth and they become tech-enabled or technology-first glorified LSP. So the three companies that you mentioned are making most of their revenue from services, language services, and not necessarily the technology solution that they have. Are they disruptive? They have solutions, technology-first solutions that I would say would be incremental innovations, but not really disruptive innovations. They haven't completely changed the way things are done, and I think that the answer to your question, Costa, is no.
So we just took a long time to say no.
Yeah.
Thanks, Kasia. All right, next up we have Kyle Chow. Early on, it was said that there has been a reshuffling of work back to the vendor side, but then later on there was a slide saying that 64% of clients were reducing their volumes with LSPs. How is work being reshuffled back to the vendor side when clients are ordering less?
Well, I think it depends a little bit on the segment as well. When we were talking about things being reshuffled back to the LSPs, I highlighted the tech industry because that's where the mass layoffs occurred, and that's where we talked to LSPs who derive a large portion of the revenue from that segment, who said that employees have come back who previously left them for clients like Amazon, Microsoft, and so on. So that was a specific one about the tech industry. And when it comes to clients reducing order volumes, yeah, I mean, I don't know what more I can add to that. This is a sample as well. We have, what was it, 64% that are
But
data.
these are answers provided by LSPs. Right?
Yes,
Keep in mind
LSPs,
that this is a perception of LSPs, of the respondents on the survey, that clients are ordering less. There is an element that very seldom is captured in market research, which is the fact that if we look at the future, when we're projecting the growth of the companies of the industry to 90 billion in 5 years, which is incredible, what we're not factoring in is the amount of new clients, new companies that appear every year. This new development of large language models is going to create a whole new industry of new companies that they could use ChatGPT to localize their products and their websites, but they probably won't, because one thing is to translate the words, the other thing is to put them into a product and transform that into a revenue generating activity. So, but there's going to be a lot of ChatGPT-like companies providing artificial intelligence solutions that are going to be coming to the market, and they'll be buying new services and so on. This type of growth is not captured in the surveys because people don't know what they don't know. They are reporting on the past and perception, and very frequently you have the recency effect, of the fact that people report the things that happened in the last 3 weeks and not the things that happened in the last real year, right? So it's a very good catch, Kyle. I understand your question, but this is a perception. 64% of the respondents said that one of the effects of the economic change is a reduction in demand from some clients. But there were a fraction of them had said that there was no change, and there were other, I think a third, that were saying that there was growth in demand. So you'll have this. This is a question with multiple answers. So it doesn't mean that that is the most important thing that is happening. It's the perception of 64% of the companies that respond.
Awesome.
Convoluted answer.
Convoluted answers as usual. And I'll just do a shameless plug for Nimdzi services here. This is why clients choose to work with Nimdzi. Nimdzi partners get full access to consulting hours. It's really easy to schedule time with us. We call them office hours. So if you're out there and you're a Nimdzi client, or your organization is a Nimdzi client, then schedule some office hours and you can pick our brains a little bit further. We can get into the nuances. If you're not a Nimdzi partner, then reach out anyways.
What are you waiting for?
Exactly. One last real question before we get going here. And this is from Alvaro. I had it right here. Alvaro Montoya. Question for Sarah Hickey. When you say LSPs are becoming tech players offering new tech solutions into the market, do you see them building the technology in-house or using third-party providers' technology? For your example of building an app, do the LSPs build the app in-house or hired a third-party company to build it?
Hi, Alvaro, first of all. Good to have you. Yeah, I think you're mixing two things I said. The one thing I said was that LSPs are redefining themselves as tech companies, which is not necessarily something I would always consider valid. In some cases, I've seen companies that have built their in-house technology, but more to facilitate their services. So this is not technology that they are licensing and selling. Nonetheless, they are calling themselves tech companies. And our point in that section was that this has more to do with marketing and lead generation and becoming more appealing to investors than them actually being technology providers. I think the other thing you may have caught as well is that in the same section, I mentioned that one company, several companies, but one that I highlight also in the report that comes out, has built a specific app just for one client. Whether that one was built in-house or not, I actually cannot say. I don't have that particular information. I just know that that was a customized app that they did specifically for one client, which was a very hyper client-focused solution. It was by Stryker. It's not a secret. It's also in the report, and it's in the annual report. So you can read up on that as well when it comes out.
Great. Thanks, Sarah. And the very, very last question, loaded question or planted question from Mario Line over at Multilingual. How do you get a physical copy of the Nimdzi 100 when it's printed this year?
Yes, well, thanks for the question, Marla. We already said it in the intro, but we cannot say it often enough, actually. Is that if you are a subscriber to Multilingual magazine, then you will receive a copy of the Nimdzi 100 with the next edition. If you're not a subscriber yet, I would encourage you, of course, to subscribe to Multilingual magazine.
Great.
And the PDF will be available for free for download on our website on Friday with the full report. What you have today, if you go to the Nimdzi 100 on our website, on the Nimdzi website, you're going to have a summary version, the one that we released on March. February, the end of February.
Yeah.
On March 10th, we're going to have a full report, 50 pages with lots of graphs that we shared here in the presentation today, and a downloadable PDF for you to have fun with. And by the way, you know that the tables in our website are downloadable, and you can download, compare, analyze, and play with the Excel spreadsheets if you are that type of person.
Exactly. For now, it's the ranking and a few data points on the website. On Friday, everything will go live, and there will be everything we talked about today in much more detail. There will be more than what we talked about today, more trends, and a lot more data, like a lot more data.
All right. We're out of time for questions. So Sarah, take us home.
Yeah. So now I'd like to thank everybody for joining us today. Whether you're joining live or watching the recording afterwards, please also join me in thanking Renato, who made time to share his experience with us. Watch out for the full report that's going live on the website on Friday. We just told you about that. As we're finishing up, if you haven't already done so, make sure to go to the Nimdzi LinkedIn page, click on events, and make sure you're registered for all of the upcoming events in this ongoing series. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, or maybe compliments, please reach out to info@nimdzi.com and let us know. Lastly, if you'd like more information on how Nimdzi's clients leverage the data behind the Nimdzi 100 market report, I encourage you to check out the resources available on nimdzi.com/testimonials and look at the case studies on how Nimdzi's market research helps LSPs, buyers, and investors make informed decisions. Some example case studies are public buying organizations and industry standard pricing. Nimdzi's research helps LSP choose the right machine translation provider, expert due diligence for private equity investment, and many other case studies to learn from. You can use these resources to discover how other localization buyers have successfully approached evolving their business and get inspired how you can do the same. Once again, my name is Sarah Hickey, and it has been my pleasure to host you today. And I look forward to seeing you again next time.